Hello, Matt.
Hello, Bill.
How are you today?
Doing pretty good. It's unseasonably warm weather in Washington, D.C.
You know, I didn't tell you this, but I was in D.C. the last 2 days.
Oh, and you don't call, you don't write.
I didn't call, I didn't write. I didn't ping your beeper.
Yes. That reminds me of the 30 Rock.
So that's what I was thinking of.
Yeah. They're going to come back.
But I was in meetings, for a day and a half, and then out the door. So there's no time for pleasantries.
Well, this is actually a good segue into what I want to talk about in a minute, which is why I hate political conferences and dinners. But before we get to that, let's talk about the name game. Last week we mentioned that we need to come up with a new name or a name for what we do here. We tossed out some ideas. DMZ was one of them. Somebody on the comments section didn't like that because of the Korean War sort of reference. So I don't know if that's a deal breaker. Maybe call it deal breakers. I don't know. I kind of like self-indulgent navel gazers. I think would be a good name. But what did you get from the comment section?
Well, one person recommended bipartisan bromance.
That has something there.
So someone also mentioned that sort of bromance is over as a catchphrase. Wow. So I don't know if we want to date ourselves. And a number of folks wanted to keep it simple, just Matt and Bill or Lewis Scher, Scher Lewis, what have you.
See, I feel like I feel like we need to call upon the audience here again and summon them, because I don't think that this is the best that they can do. They can do better than that. So I think I'm not giving up on them yet.
So the contest for my 99-cent book is still on. There's still time to add your suggestion in the comment threads. No decisions have been made. The primary continues both for the Republican president and for this show.
Yeah. By the way, I think we should mention also we should talk about Spotify.
Yeah.
Not a sponsor of the show, but we are both now big fans, and you've shared a couple playlists with me. You might not know this, but Bill is a country music fan.
I am. I like songs with a good story.
Yeah. Now, when I say country music, I'm not talking Brad Paisley, Toby Keith here. I'm talking a little bit more rootsy. No, I'm sure they do have good stuff, but this isn't like pop country that you like. This is more like rootsy, not just alt country, but like rootsy, sincere, not jokey country.
My favorite stuff is Hayes Carll, Ray Wiley Hubbard, Avett Brothers, though they've sort of drifted away from country as of late. Robbie Fulks, Casey Chambers, things like that are sort of where my head is at. Although you can look. There's certainly some pop country tracks which I think sort of harken to that. Toby Keith's "I Love This Bar" is a fantastic song.
Yeah, and a damn good video too.
Yeah.
Who was the guy? I turned you on to somebody. The actual guy
who he had written some songs that I liked. He wrote "Dixie Chicks Is Long Time Gone."
Yeah. What's his name again?
Daryl Scott.
Daryl Scott. Okay.
But I did not know I didn't know his name. I didn't know he produced his own albums and whatnot. His stuff sounded great.
Good stuff. So anyway, we'll keep that conversation going. But I do recommend Spotify. I have to say, much better than Pandora, at least for me and my needs.
Well, it's better for sharing. Better sharing playlists and things like that.
Yeah. Not just that, with Pandora, it's like you say, I want to listen to Warrant, and they play a Skid Row song. With Spotify, you say, I want to listen to Cherry Pie, and they play Cherry Pie. And then you're like, okay, now I want to listen to Dirty, Rotten, Filthy, Stinkin' Rich, which, by the way, I think I'm holding that out as a headline for a blog about Mitt Romney. Mm-hmm. I'm kicking myself. I missed Carolina Liar would have been a great blog headline about 2 weeks ago. And I totally missed that.
Well, Spencer Ackerman used to have all of his blog posts be rap lyric headlines. All his headlines were rap lyrics.
Well, it's probably amazing how apropos many of them are.
Right. So you could do if you did nothing but country lyrics for your headlines, that could be your new thing.
But what kills that is the search engine optimization bullshit. You got to search engine optimize, because if people Google something about your story, if your headline's "Mo money, mo problems" or whatever, it's not going to come up.
But the text will still be in the body of the post.
Yeah, but Google looks. The headlines are are weighted heavier than just regular text.
So Google seems to have totally blown up its algorithm, because they're now just shoving you into Google Plus whenever they can, and they're prioritizing links of things that you've already been to, or similar things that you've been to. So it is a less pure search than it was.
I don't care what they do. I just want, and this goes for everything, I want them to settle on this for a while. I want to go a couple years where there are, this might be a case for some government intervention, Bill, where there should be some sort of regulation. Because here's the deal. For my job, I tweet and Facebook and all the stuff to get, my message out there, my writing out there. And they keep changing it around. I mean, what if you worked in a factory and I showed up one night and just moved all the equipment around and changed the passwords? You'd be ticked. And that's how I feel every time something like this changes. I think we need a little bit of standardization.
If only when the government invented the internet, they didn't allow private companies to take over sort of the main functions. If there was a government-run search engine, we wouldn't have these problems that you're talking about. I think we come to agreement on socialized internet.
I think that Big Brother should be a central planning agency down in Moscow that controls the internet. The tubes. They should control the series of tubes that lead to our computer. All right. So I wanted to start off, Bill, and I want to get your take on that. I want to complain about political conferences, because CPAC's coming up. And
you like CPAC.
And political. I have a love-hate relationship with all these things. Let me start off by saying the people of CPAC are very good to me. Let me say that it's very important that I go to these things, that I have access. It's very important to my job. But I hate going to things like this.
I mean, do you hate there's so many, or just if there's only one a year, you would hate the one? You just hate the phoniness of any kind of convention.
I hate a lot of things. Let me tell you one thing that will fit into the self-indulgent navel-gazing paradigm. And this will sound incredibly narcissistic and jerky, but I think we could probably agree that I'm not a household name. But for people who are conservative political junkies, my mug is on the front page of the Daily Caller, which is cool. Right. And, and I do some TV here and there. And so there might be someone that attended a conference that I spoke at 5 years ago, and since then has seen me on the Daily Caller or whatever, and I go to a conference, and this person who could be very nice will stop me, and I confess this is my hang-up, but they will stop me and talk to me, and I may not know who they are, but they may know who I am, and it really bugs me. Like, I'm not mad at them. It actually makes me feel bad because I don't know who they are. You want to keep your
personal space.
And when I try to and sometimes you have to pretend that you know people, and I mean, like, some of this is just I'm maybe not that great at recalling names. I'd be a horrible politician, let's face it.
Well, there's a certain personality type that sort of likes that kind of constant adulation, likes being recognized. And then some folks just want to do their own thing and not be bothered beyond that.
I am somewhat introverted. When I present something on the web, I can control the image and I can control everything about it. And when I'm out, and it's overwhelming. There are thousands of people who come to these things. The other thing too is a matter of, I feel like if I was just a civilian and I was a political junkie and I flew in from Seattle, with my wife, and we stayed at a hotel and we went to a political conference, that would be really fun. But when you're actually expected to produce content and you're schlepping around a laptop and an iPhone that's dead, and you got to have this meeting with people. It's just
I found that it is impossible to produce content during a conference. If someone's expecting you to do that, that is just an unfair ask because there's too many things tugging at you.
Well, and there are people.
How well known you are, there's always so many things going on, and people bumping into you and whatnot, and you can't sit down and have a moment to think while it's happening.
I mean, there are people. I've talked about this before. The Dave Weigels, the Phil Kleins of the world, who somehow managed to go to conferences and bang out 5 blog posts, and it's like they live off the land, like scavengers. They'll be in a corner somewhere on the floor on a laptop. I don't know how they find power outlets or Wi-Fi. I can never get Wi-Fi to work. And there's people coming up and talking to me. And the thing is, a lot of the people who come up and talk to me, I would love, they're fascinating, interesting people. I'd love to go away from other people and sit and talk to them and get to know them or learn from them. But that's different than, like, bumping into someone in a hallway and not having the time to have a real conversation. This is like what Adam Carolla would call rich white guy problems, I know. But so let me ask you, Bill, I mean, how do you feel this way about conferences?
I dislike conferences. My organization puts one on every year, and I have to go. And obviously, it's a good thing for the movement to have this sort of infrastructure and whatnot. I mean, it's all this utility towards it. But as far as my personal enjoyment, being on TV a lot less than you. I don't have the same degree of people, begging for my attention. But when you're just in a community, you're in the liberal diaspora, the conservative diaspora. People might know your handle, and just it's just like going to any kind of party where you have a lot of acquaintances. People want to make small talk, and there's a part of it that's nice and fun. There's a part of it that gets very exhausting after 3 days, but especially when there's an expectation of you to do work. And write about what's going on, and it becomes impossible.
My take is, if you want to cover like CPAC, if you want to cover the speeches, stay at home and watch it on C-SPAN or the computer, like stream it. Don't go. I mean, there's the benefit of going, but if you want to cover the speeches, the actual content, don't go.
But now, beyond the navel gazing aspect of this. CPAC this year, I imagine will be very interesting because the conservative movement is having sort of having an odd time of it in the middle of this Republican primary, and you're on the verge of nominating someone. I guess Romney did win at least one of the CPAC straw polls, if not more than one. But every time I think he has won, he gets booed upon winning because he generally has won by busting in a lot of people to go to the conference and to participate in the straw poll. So he's never really been, he didn't come out of the movement. The movement arguably is having its biggest influence within the party structure in the last 30 years, yet we're not able to prevent him from consolidating his front-runner status.
I think the first point is, if you see me at CPAC, do not make eye contact. Putting that aside, now I'm going to be like a complete, like everyone's going to hate me.
You just grow a big thick beard and wear a fedora or something, and don't dress like you normally do, and see if you can just kind of go incognito.
The other, you're right though. I mean, I think the question is like, how's Romney, how's Romney received?
I mean, is Romney going?
I don't even know if he's speaking. I know that Newt is confirmed. I saw that Rand Paul's speaking, Marco Rubio. I have to assume that Romney is, and I should know this. I should find out. But
that aside, I imagine that the people there are going to have some kind of internal conversation, sort of how all in are we in this? Are we going to really go out and knock doors for Romney? Or do we have to go blaze our own conservative path because the top of the ticket is not in sync with us?
How does he do? How's he received? Does he... there's like the heavy-handed thing where he can try too hard to pack the crowd. Does he go overboard? Do they soft pedal it? How does that work? It'll be interesting to see. There are three big tests, obviously, during during a general election. You've got the debates. You've got the vice presidential pick. And the third one I don't remember. Oops. No, there was. I wrote about. You're supposed to laugh, Bill. I wrote about this, but now I don't remember it. I think it's the Department of Energy. But one of the big tests, and this is not the third, but one of the big tests, like before, I would say, before all that, is CPAC. You know, that's by far the biggest political conference.
I mean, it gets about 10,000 people a year.
Yeah, something like that. It's a. I mean, if he does, if it could be a moment. And by the way, Romney actually dropped out of the race in 2008 at CPAC. So there's some interesting history there.
And what are the dates for CPAC?
It is not this. It's a week from Friday. So this episode of Blogging Heads will probably go up on a Friday, and 7 days later, CPAC will begin.
So this is in the middle of kind of the lull of the race. There's a smattering of caucuses and primaries in February. There's only one debate scheduled for February, not for a few more weeks. Super Tuesday is top of March. The question is, can Newt sort of maintain attention in this period when he is maybe, if he can't actually win a contest, and maybe he can. Maybe he can somehow pick off a caucus or something and reassert his viability. Is CPAC a place? I mean, Newt usually makes a big grand entrance at CPAC. He's usually the final speaker.
And he usually comes into Eye of the Tiger. Apparently, that's being next as well.
So this is usually more his crowd than Romney's crowd. Is this a place where are they gonna give him the love again and try to send a message that we don't want this to be over? Or is there a sense now in the movement that, look, Newt had his shot, he blew it, he's made too many mistakes, we need to, accept reality and focus on beating Obama. Do you have any sense where the temperature is right now?
I think that it's very tough for Gingrich. He has to, Nevada's on Saturday. That's a Romney state. I mean, it's very possible that Romney finishes first and Ron Paul finishes second, and Newt could come in third or worse. Michigan is a Romney state. His dad was governor, obviously. He grew up in Michigan, I think. So it's going to be a tough month for Newt, and he's going to need attention, and CPAC, I think, could afford him an opportunity for that. And by the way, the three, and I wrote a piece yesterday, how Romney can woo conservatives, and Ed Gillespie, the former RNC chairman, told me that there are three moments which Romney can use to persuade conservatives. It's the convention, the vice presidential pick, and the debates. Were the three he said. And it rings about true, but I think CPAC is an important moment before the nomination.
But isn't Romney at some point going to pivot? I mean, don't most people expect as you get closer to the general, he's going to be less interested in appeasing conservatives and more interested in reaching out to independents?
You should read my piece because conservatives warn against that. Many grassroots.
I think it is probably more than any time in my memory is it unclear how a likely presidential nominee will position himself. I mean, there's been a general acceptance that the Nixon adage that you run to the edge of your party in the primary, you run back to the center for the general. I think it's been harder in recent years to be that crude about it. People are scrutinize every inch of the campaign more closely and call you on those types of shifts more readily. And after McCain, who also someone not embraced by the conservative base, managed to win the nomination, and he tried to go hard right in the general to compensate for that, both his VP pick and his general approach, and that didn't work. Although in the conservative telling of this, Palin is the one that sort of gave him a shot, and it's because he wasn't conservative in the first place, which is why he didn't win. So there's sort of competing narratives what went wrong there, and so if you're Romney, you got to pick one. You got to decide which path you're going to go, and maybe there's a way he tries to thread the needle with it. But this has bedeviled plenty of Republican nominees in the past. I think Dole had a hard time walking this line against an incumbent Democrat. You can go all the way back to Alf Landon, who was more of a moderate in 1936, governor of Kansas, running against FDR, and then got increasingly conservative as the race went on and got kind of twisted around, and that was a big bust too. So I imagine there's obviously, from what you're saying, what others are saying, there's going to be a push from the right to send a message to Romney. You need to do even better to make conservatives happy if you want to have a shot. Is you need to boost turnout from the base to win. But I'm sure there's going to be a lot of other advice coming from him saying, this race is one in the middle, right? And these conservatives have no other place to go, and they hate Obama so much that they're going to stick with you no matter how far to the left you lean.
Yeah, it's a conundrum. We could talk about it all day, but read the piece. Because I think it hits on all that.
Any serious threat that someone would go third party because it's Romney? Let's say, I can't abide by Romney. We need to have a conservative alternative here. Is there any chatter about that?
I don't think that's likely. I think the danger is just a lack of motivation. People who just don't turn out on election day, or who just aren't enthusiastic, who are demoralized. They're not going to work for them. They're not going to. I mean, I think the VP, again, there were the three moments, the convention speech. I mean, the VP pick, I think a Marco Rubio pick could be all he needs. He can still reach out, and I sort of reject the notion that this is a binary choice, that you can only do one. I really believe, that you can, that a conservative message communicated effectively is appealing to independents and most Americans. And I believe that by picking someone like Marco Rubio, for example, who would be more than satisfactory to conservatives, but also could appeal to to middle America, to soccer moms, to a lot of folks with an inspiring message. So I kind of reject the idea, and this is, you're not the only person who thinks this, but I kind of reject the idea that it's that you have to pick one or the other. I think you can do both if you're smart. If you're smart about it, and if you communicate the message effectively, you can be conservative, keep conservatives on board, motivate them to turn out on election day, and appeal to sort of swing voters.
Well, I want to get back to Rubio and the VP pick for a second, in a little bit. But first, I just want to point out that everything you've just said there, people on the left say to Obama right now that you have a problem, that even though you are pretty competitive in the general, you have to worry about demoralized base, and because the economy is hurting aspects of your base more, they're dissatisfied with you, and the Latinos are dissatisfied with you because you didn't deliver on immigration reform. So you need to do something to goose that up. So stop leaning to the right and start focusing. Bring out the populism more. And that's going to be your saving grace come the general. So you have these totally diametrically opposite but parallel arguments coming from both parties' bases.
Well, let me say this though, Bill. The liberals may be right, but I would think if you're judging by history, I think it's safer to say that a Republican can win by being conservative than to say a Democrat can win by being liberal. By and large, I think history, at least recent history, would imply that moderate Democrats, Bill Clinton, Jimmy Carter, who appear to be more moderate, And even Obama, to a certain extent, tend to win. Liberal Democrats tend to lose. The opposite's true on the Republican side. McCain, who was somewhat moderate, lost. Dole, who was somewhat moderate, lost. George H.W. Bush, who was moderate, lost his re-election. And
but he won the first time on Kindler, Gentler Nation.
I would argue that he essentially got Ronald Reagan's third term.
I mean, that will be, and obviously he said no new taxes as well. But he did try to soften the edge.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about that.
And George W. Bush tried to soften the edge with compassionate conservatism.
That's true. That's true.
I would argue more that there's obviously there's no set formula for it, but the folks who have been able to meld an ideological conviction with creative twists that also have appeal to the broader middle in a way that's not clumsy.
Ross Douthat had a great piece in the New York, a good piece in the New York Times last week about this, that the candidates, the best, most politicians can either be demagogic or sort of, appeal to the intellect. And you're either one or the other, usually. But Douthat argued that the best politicians, and he said Reagan and Clinton, had the capacity to be, to throw out red meat and fiery rhetoric and to demagogue a little bit, but also to appeal to the better angels and to be calm so Douthat argued that that's the best politicians have the capacity to, when the times call for it, they can they throw out the red meat and play the hard-hitting partisan game, but they can also tone it down and be more moderate temperamentally.
And I think that's the way Obama was in 2008. I mean, much of his rhetoric was quite liberal, relatively speaking, at the presidential level, more so than Gore or Kerry or Clinton or even Dukakis had been. But there's certainly wrinkles to it that made him not come across just like a knee-jerk ideologue and someone who was speaking to the broader middle. Now that becomes trickier once you're an incumbent. You have a record that you have to defend.
Right.
It's not just about rhetoric anymore. You have certain policies you have to stand by. But not to rehash our discussion last week, I thought in his State of the Union he did lay out a path to show a defense of active government that wasn't knee-jerk, that didn't have some acknowledgments towards, hey, we need to reform bureaucracies, have smarter regulations, not have wasteful spending, et cetera, et cetera. And obviously very, very assertive on the national security front, talking up his successful military actions. So I think Obama has a fairly good groove in that respect. I think he has at least a game plan how he's going to meld these strains of the body politic. And Romney, I don't think he has that fleshed out quite yet. I feel Romney is more of kind of a herky-jerky candidate that kind of is, he sort of knows what to say in the moment, but how it's going to play out over the course of a full year in a way that seems very natural and authentic and cohesive, I think that is, the jury's very far out on whether he can pull that off.
Well, speaking of Romney, I wanted to, close, unless you have another topic. I wanted to ask you about something I've been thinking about. Romney doesn't have a ton of supporters, but for some reason, the pundits who support him go all in. They, totally drink the Kool-Aid. So, last cycle, Hugh Hewitt and Catherine Lopez at National Review were, the biggest Romney cheerleaders. And it was, so transparent that it was quite almost embarrassing. And I actually think at a certain point it started to actually hurt Romney. And now this time around, Ann Coulter and Jennifer Rubin at the Washington Post are like just as in the tank. I mean, Ann Coulter is now literally defending Romney Care. She wrote a piece literally saying like 3 cheers for Romney Care, defending the individual mandate, which is patently absurd and completely out of character. And then you have Jennifer Rubin, who had this, I would say, incredibly embarrassing post where last night, Wednesday night, it appeared that there were some erroneous news reports which suggested that Newt Gingrich, in fact, would receive the Donald Trump endorsement. And Rubin wrote this piece saying, well, that makes perfect sense because he's an unserious, ridiculous person, and of course he would endorse Newt. And now it turns out that Donald has endorsed Rubin's favorite guy, Mitt Romney. So obviously that was a little bit interesting. I guess my question
those examples, there's no overlap really between Coulter and Rubin as far as where they come from in the conservative movement. Some conservatives don't even say Rubin qualifies as being conservative.
The interesting thing about it to me is, like, they're all in. Like, Rick Perry had fans or commentators or pundits who liked him, but none of them who were apologists. I'm sure that there were people out there like that, but nobody of that caliber, no high profile conservative that I can think of is in the tank for any candidate to the degree that these people are for Romney, and I'd like to know why. I'd love to get. Do you have a thought?
I thought you would have a better in on this than me.
No, because it's weird. I mean, maybe the audience.
Well, the thing with Coulter, I think, is particularly strange. I mean, Rubin has always had a very predominant foreign policy focus, and that doesn't fully explain why she's all in on Romney and not say Gingrich, because Gingrich is certainly playing neocon for Rubin's taste, one would think. But perhaps she just feels like, Romney has the better chance of succeeding and restoring a neocon foreign policy, and therefore I don't care about his other ideological transgressions. That's not what I'm primarily concerned about. So that strikes me as the logic behind Rubin. I think there's an interesting question there why the Washington Post lets her be in the tank for a candidate. She presumably works for a newspaper. Even though you have opinion columnists, opinion columnists are not supposed to be flacks. They're supposed to still be
right. It is sort of dangerously. It is sort of dangerously close to. I mean, again, my point's like the transparency. It's like, to be like so in the tank for one candidate, it's just unseemly, and at some point, it almost hurts your cause because everybody knows you're never going to say anything critical about Romney, and if you do, it's like, why didn't he say this? Because he's so much better at that. It's
right. People expect I mean, obviously it's up to the reader to decide whether you think so-and-so is credible or not, but typically people want to see that you have some sort of consistent internal compass that you are gauging political figures on. If your own arguments are shifting depending on what's going to make sense for your guy in a given day, that's going to.
And that's where this Donald Trump thing is so damaging, because she was saying that Donald Trump's endorsement of Newt confirms everything we know about Newt, that he's grandiose, that he's unserious, that unscrupulous people are attracted to him. I mean, I haven't seen her blog post since the Trump endorsement, but I would doubt that she would criticize Romney. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe she will go right now. Romney should have dumped Trump. He should not have stood up there with him. This was a huge mistake. Maybe she'll write that.
If she is totally calculating and crass about it, you could say to yourself, yeah, I'll take a pot shot Romney over Trump. That's not really going to upset his candidacy, but it'll cover my base and make people think, okay, I'm at least calling it like I see it for a little bit.
It might not be a bad move for her if she were.
But the Coulter thing is interesting because I feel like this is totally conspiratorial, outside analysis. Because because there's also this odd Drudge-Romney connection that people don't seem to fully get.
It dates back to Romney's campaign manager, Matt Rhodes, who ran opposition research for the RNC, who I'm sure was feeding Drudge a lot of information.
Perhaps it's just a straight up business proposition that if Romney gets it, Drudge is going to keep a pipeline into good scoops.
Or maybe they're just legitimately friends. I mean, but whatever the case, I mean, it was very clear that a couple days before Florida, everything on that site was like bashing Gingrich.
Right, but now Coulter and Drudge are also close, right?
Yeah, I think they're pals.
Right. So there seems to be a nexus there where they're both just totally throwing out their past ideologies. I mean, Drudge is you would think Drudge would be like a Ron Paul guy. He's sort of a pure libertarian, and Coulter is someone clearly on the far right of the spectrum. So for her to be defending, Romney here, saying that Romney is like the only authentic conservative in the race is just utterly bizarre. And again, she's not applying the same standard to him as she's applying to everybody else. I mean, most of them have some, heresies in their record. But she completely dumps on everyone else's heresies and then totally goes in a pretzel to defend Romney's heresies. So it makes you seem like a flack and not a serious analyst. But why?
It's funny you say not a serious analyst. Do you remember that from like 4 years ago?
Right.
Hugh Hewitt, whom I like a lot and is a very smart and very good guy, but at the peak of the Romney Kool-Aid, he wrote this post that said that if you don't agree that this was a great speech by Mitt Romney, you are not to be trusted as a serious analyst. And so, like, Michelle Malkin and others had, like, these little banners made, not a serious analyst or something like that. I just thought it was funny that you happened to say that. I tweeted out the other night, I actually tweeted out, if Mitt Romney's victory speech rocked, and if you disagree, you're not a serious analyst. And not a single person remembered. Like, I had people complaining to me, like, I got feedback like, how can you say that? Romney's a phony. And I'm like, well, it was kind of a joke. But it was a good victory speech, too. It actually was. But
this just shows that you're old.
Nobody remembers more than 15 minutes.
Right. So I feel like there are so many weird, Romney incursions into the conservative movement here, which I gather are making other conservatives very uncomfortable and scratching their heads. And Coulter is someone who usually is one of the other big shows at CPAC. She tends to be not quite a keynote, but tends to have sort of like a stand-up routine, towards the end that it tends to be a big draw. I don't know if she's doing that again this year or not. But are people going to be angry with her that she is being the Romney flack? I don't know if that's going to be a point of contention at CPAC this year.
I don't know. I mean, I think she is speaking. I don't know how she'll be received. My default position is that she'll be she'll go up there and say horrible things about Barack Obama, and they'll applaud it wildly. That's my guess.
Right. But if she goes up there and starts, talking up Romney, how might the crowd react?
I think that she might do that because she likes publicity, and that would get her publicity. I think the crowd would be divided. There'd be grumblings and jeers and applause and everything in between. And I think she might
happen. That might also spark coverage of proof that the conservative base is very displeased with how things are turning out.
Right. It would be bad for the movement. It would be bad for Romney, especially. But it would probably be good for her in terms of publicity. So let's see if she does it. I think, I tend to think a lot of what professional pundits do is what their first motive is to get attention and publicity and controversy. I mean, I don't mean to be cynical or bust anybody's bubble by saying that, but I tend to think that it's, I think some of them who drink the Kool-Aid do become, like, sadly.
Well, this is, I think, a challenge for Romney going forward, and Obama has had some tension with this too. Once you become, the nominee or the near nominee, and people start coming onto the bandwagon, it becomes harder to control your overall message because you might have people here who have ulterior motive. They want you to win, but they also want to get attention from themselves. And now you're going to start having to defend every crackpot thing that somebody else says. So how much of a leash can Romney put on his growing list of endorsements? I mean, he seemed to get Trump on a pretty good leash today. He didn't say anything totally off the wall at the endorsement announcement today. As far as I could tell, I caught a little bit of it, but I think it went on for about 60 seconds, so he didn't have an opportunity to say something crazy. No Q&A, of course, no chance for Trump to ad-lib. So I think Romney people must be cognizant of that.
He's already a birther. He's already said, I've made many times more, much more money than Mitt Romney.
But no opportunity for the reporters to probe those past statements and force them to paper over it. If Trump's going to go off on TV later on and mouth off, and if Coulter says something offensive at CPAC, as she said, arguably in the past, is Romney going to have to answer for that now? Or can Romney put a call in and say, hey, Ann, this is not the year, to use an anti-gay slur. This is not the year to crack a birther joke.
That's a good point. She did make fun of John Edwards and use not the F word, but the gay F word.
Right.
I think in referencing him. So a slur that she used at a CPAC, which was controversial, and I think it might have gotten her temporarily banned from CPAC, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I don't think she was the quasi keynote the following year.
Yeah. So anyway, it'll be interesting to see what happens. CPAC's coming up. We'll keep an eye on that. Sound off in the comments. What should we name this thing? Bill and Matt's Excellent Adventure, whatever you like. And also, if you have any thoughts on this, what is driving these pundits to be... Because from a strategic standpoint, I think you want to have a certain bit of independence. I don't know that it makes sense to go all in with any candidate. Why are they doing this? What drives them? What's the motivation? Love to hear from you. So let us know.
Absolutely. Always good to talk to you, Matt.
Good talking to you. Keep sending me those country playlists on Spotify.
Well, I feel all my musical knowledge is sort of stopped at 2009 ever since my baby was born. So perhaps you need to catch me up on what's happened in the country the past 2 years.
All right, I'll do my best.
Okay.
I'll do my best.
Take care.
All right, buddy. Thanks.
Bye.